It's the Marc Lee Show, bringing you enlightenment and culture.
All right, folks, we're in tune to another edition of the radio show with Marc Lee. It is definitely good to have all of you fine folks over here checking out the program and things of that nature. So definitely glad that a lot of folks are out there enjoying what they can do during these hard times that we are in. And definitely a lot of folks are dealing with a lot of the issues that are going on around the world, whether that is coping with the coronavirus pandemic that is definitely hitting the world, or whether that is dealing with a lot of the issues around racial equality and things of that nature, or whether it's just dealing with the economic hardships that many of us are facing in these days and times. So definitely, I know a lot of folks are very much interested in what is happening around the world and are definitely being involved in the various things that are happening. Some are being very active in what is going on and are doing a variety of things to help out in what that situations are. So definitely, I know a lot of folks have been involved in a number of things that have been happening. I know yours truly has been actually reading a very interesting book, which is Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, which of course deals with the Native American population and talks about some of the hardships that were happening with that population in the early parts of the American experiment, or what some people call the American experiment, when America was actually being founded and things of that nature. So definitely had a lot of folks involved in that and checking that out. So definitely folks were might find that book to be very interesting. Like I said, it's by D. Brown and it's called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. In addition to that, I've also been checking out a variety of other things that are happening in the society as well. As a matter of fact, I went and got my hair cut earlier today and was checking out none other than one of the sports commentators on ESPN. And he actually had a very interesting comment, which is he was thinking that perhaps we needed to get some of the athletes together, some of the, he used the example of the NBA stars. He was saying like maybe get 25 of them together, and then from there, you could form a pack of some sort. So definitely he was thinking that that could be a great and amazing thing to have happen, to use that power, because he was thinking that some of these things are only symbolic actions that are taking place in our society right now. So, you know, whether it's putting slogans or things on the back of T-shirts, or whether it's some of the other actions that are happening, he was afraid that some of these are only signs of symbolism and not actual action. So that was one of his theories, was why don't some of these athletes get together, put just a portion of their money, since many of them have million-dollar contracts and multi-million-dollar contracts, and then use that money to get together and form actual political action committees and things along those lines. So that was one of the theories that he was putting out there. It'll be interesting to hear whether any of the NBA players or NFL players adopt to what he's got to say. But my first guest, and I've got two guests that will be joining me, is a friend of mine who I've known for a number of years, and she has definitely been involved in a lot with the justice world and things of that nature, and that is my good friend, Stella Adams. So many of you may not know about Stella's background, so I just wanted Stella to share a little bit about what she's all about and what she's been involved in and how she's doing, how she's coping with the coronavirus and things along those lines, because we know a lot of folks are working from home, and also what her take is on the Black Lives Matter movement, because that is definitely something that we're seeing a lot around the world. So Stella, how are you doing today? And like I said, how are you coping in the world that we're living in this new normal, as they like to call it?
Thank you, Mark. I'm doing really well today. In this new normal, I am one of those, you know how they have the tick box of if you are this, stay at home, stay healthy. The only one I can't tag is I'm not 65. Other than that, oops. So I have been on what appears to me to be house arrest, but pleasantly so. You know, I could be in so many different spaces than the space I'm in. So I am blessed and highly favored. I am housebound, but have a big backyard because that's a benefit of being a Southerner that a lot of folks don't have. And I have the ability to work from home. I have the ability to be on this podcast with you with sound and sight. And so many people suffering under COVID do not have broadband access, do not have good health care access, do not have spaces where they can get out of the room. And so COVID is impacting people very differently. And those of us who have these privileges need to acknowledge that it is a privilege to be able to do this. So thank you for offering me this opportunity. And I'm doing well.
All right, definitely. Tell folks how you got involved in the justice work. Because like I said, I've known you for a number of years. You've definitely been involved in the justice world. And also just your take on what's going on with Black Lives Matter. I know that I had the pleasure of running across Mia Wilson with Spirit House. And it seems like a lot of folks that are in our generation are stepping back and letting some of the younger folks that are in their 20s and 30s kind of take the lead, but also being supportive of them. So I was just wondering what your take is of the movement, whether the movement is going along the way that you would like to see it. And I'd also like to hear some of your thoughts on some of the theories, because like I said, I was over there getting my haircut and I did hear, I think it's, I forget the gentleman's name, maybe it's Steven Jackson or something like that, that's with ESPN. And he was talking about the need for some of our athletes to actually put some of their resources together and actually not just do symbolic actions. He's glad that we've been doing these symbolic actions, but he'd like to see some hardcore actions that are done, whether that's forming a pack as he was proposing or whether that's doing some other things. But I was just wondering, what are some of your thoughts about the movement, the way that it's going, and just how you feel about it as it's going on? And also, it seems like we're getting a lot more of our allies that are actually stepping up as well, because we're seeing a lot more of the allies that are actually at the lead than even some of our own youth. So I was just wondering what some of your take is on that.
First, nothing but props and respect for the younger generation. Or don't think I wasn't ready to go back out in the street. Don't think I was not ready. But I didn't have to, because the movement is mature. I don't care what people say about it. This movement, these activists today, they are mature. They have an agenda. What I worry about is other people co-opting their agenda in a manner that I know they co-opted our agenda when we were out there in the streets. Babies, I have done a hunger strike for 30 days. I have marched. I have done all kinds of marches. I have been arrested. I got a good arrest photo that MSNBC took, and then there's that Fox News photo out there that I know one day might show up on the air somewhere. But I've done all the street activism. But I've also done, and why I'm so excited about this generation is what it's also done, and it took me a little longer than it's taken them, is I did the Wall Street action, not just the street action, right? I got in, they've got to get engaged in the policy work, and they've got to get engaged in the advocacy and political work. And that's why I'm so excited about Black Lives Matter, because they have matured from their first iteration. This is not a brand. This didn't come overnight. They've been fighting for Black lives since 2014. This is the maturity of that moment. It's their understanding that this, and this is actually, COVID is really responsible for this moment, because white folks didn't, and other folks didn't have anything to do but look at TV. They weren't working. They couldn't pretend that 8 minutes and 49 seconds wasn't happening live in front of them on their phones, on their Slack, on their Facebook, on their MSNBC, on their Fox News. We all witnessed the moment. At that moment, we Black people were not crazy. Oh, that stuff really does happen. The videos, video we know didn't just work by itself. They saw Rodney King get beat, and they still got acquitted, right? We obeyed the rules, right? Castillo obeyed the rules. I have a carry. Let me get my license. Bam. Follow the rules, don't follow the rules. It didn't matter. And so this movement is mature. And their requests are mature. The policy decisions, how in the world? I want us to think about the methodology, the fact that an federal anti-lynching bill only got passed this year. Did you know that?
I did not realize that. The first time it got passed was an anti-lynching bill. Was the first ever got passed in the United States?
Ever. Tim Scott, Kamala Harris, and Cory Booker introduced and were able to get passed anti-lynching legislation this year.
Wow.
That's pre-COVID.
Wow.
This year.
Wow. That's just amazing.
So if we wait for folks to take to the streets and stay in the streets, but also these babies are attacking Wall Street. They are going after the city's settlement funds. They have discovered and articulated. Did you know that many police departments across this country have used general obligation bonds to pay police settlements? They have, and so if the city of Chicago has like $8 million set aside in these bonds, but taxpayer paid bonds to pay off future settlement of police violence. Yeah, these babies, these young folks, and I apologize for my ageism in calling y'all babies, but these young people are on it. They are digging deep. They know where the money is. They know how the money works, and they're coming after your money. It took me years to figure out just the little space that I was in. But corporate landlords, they're coming for you. They're gunning for you. They have an agenda. They have a plan. They are not playing. They're not just Black Lives Matter. It's not just a slogan for them. They're defenders of Black lives, and they are fighting for Black lives, and they have the weapons. And I just love being able to sit back and say, go team, go.
They are doing some amazing things. There's no doubt about that. And by the way, Fernando Zeladon, who's one of our regular listeners and is watching from California, he just said that actually that bill that you were talking about passed just this month. So he was saying that bill you were talking about actually passed just this month, and he's out there in LA doing a lot of work with economic development and sustainability around that area. And he's also talking about gentrification. I'd like to hear your comments on gentrification as well, because I know it's big in California. Of course, we've seen it's very big here in North Carolina and things of that nature. And I also want to add, I've got another young lady that's going to join us as well, Sarah Fatemi, and she's going to join us also. So I'm going to bring Sarah on. She's actually out of one of our foreign countries and everything. So I wanted to reach out to Sarah and say hello to Sarah. Sarah is a comedian that I met. Sarah, tell us a little bit about yourself as well and what you've been thinking about the movements that are going on. You're actually a young lady and a young comedian, so you've actually been a fan, I know, of Black Lives Matter and some of the other things that are going on. So I wanted to hear some of your comments about what's going on, actually coming from like that Asian culture as well.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Stella. Sorry, we're going to deal with my very frizzy hair this morning. I'm not sure what happened. But yes, I'm a comedian. I'm doing it for about 4 years now. It's been a little bit of a challenge, woman of color. And thankfully, Los Angeles, though, it's a little bit easy. There are still hoops we have to go through. As far as the movement goes, I am with Black Lives Matter to several protests in June. People saying things like, oh, it's helping spread COVID. That's not the case. We're all wearing masks. We're all social distancing. They're very brave, especially, I wasn't there in the very, very beginning. I was unable to attend the protests where, the very, very beginning ones, but I went to a few of them in March. They were very peaceful. A lot of the anti, they're trying to, there's a lot of like propaganda out there, like there's this, and that's simply not the case. I admire the work that Miss Stella Adams is doing. A lot of these people are doing. I'm still cops who killed Breonna Taylor have still not been arrested. I'm just in shock of our justice system. And, I personally feel like I'm still learning a lot because I didn't think that somewhere like America we would have such injustices. My parents, they immigrated from the Middle East. There are unfortunately like a lot of injustices over there and such. But, when you think of America, you think it's kind of almost like you think we've got it down pat. But unfortunately, that's simply not the case, especially for people of color. And even, myself, I'm as a Middle Eastern person, I just found out that, they don't consider us people of color. We are considered Caucasian. And it's kind of like, where have you been thinking? I'm sorry. No. not what my people, not what we've been through. We're not, But and I also am really trying hard to take steps to educate within my own community, the Iranian community. I'm not going to sit and pretend that there is not anti-Blackness. There's a lot of work to be done as well. And so I'm just trying my best to serve as an ally. And I'm actually not from Los Angeles, Mark. I'm from Ohio originally.
Okay.
And, to be honest, I didn't even really learn a whole lot about racism and, something like blackface until I moved out here. In Ohio, it's actually shocking thinking back how often I would see, I would witness something like that at a party and, nobody really said anything. I didn't even remember learning about it in schools, in the public education system. I went to a high school that was 93% white. I heard certain slurs said, I heard certain words said, and it's so clear that, and it's really, we have a lot of work to be done. Now, what I'm helping, I guess, in the Iranian community is every year we have a petition. I don't know if you know a lot about, Iranian traditions, but during the Persian New Year, we have a character named Haji Firuz. He comes out. So in Iran, in southern Iran, there are Afro-Iranians, and there's a very, very famous, not character, but his name is Haji Firuz. He is an Afro-Iranian, and during the Persian New Year, he comes out and he gives to children and money and such. Now, diaspora communities here in the U.S. I don't believe there's a huge immigration of Afro-Iranians. Mainly they come from Tehran, Shiraz, cities up in the center or up in the north. So what I have witnessed is I have seen, someone will come out dressed as Haji Firuz, but then they'll be donning blackface. And then, we talk to the people in our, those of us who grew up here, we talk to the people in our community about it. And we're like, well, that is not acceptable. That is offensive given the history. And I think we're starting to make some progress because you don't see it in California anymore. You do not see it in California in those celebrations anymore. I think, and I understand, I'm not in any way, justifying the action or anything, because immediately they say, well, that's not our intent, that this is an Iranian thing, not an American thing. Well, it doesn't matter because we are in a land where there has been a history of oppression, and, you need to respect. And a lot of times it's very unfortunate. People from the Middle East like to call themselves white. They love, especially people who are direct immigrants, and they believe they want the white privilege. They want to latch onto that. And they think just, calling themselves that makes it okay. And we're doing a lot of work here, kind of the second generation, trying to teach the older generation to ally with people of color, because they don't that we are also considered people of color. So yeah, there's very clearly a lot of work to be done. So my focus is primarily in that area, because I think the more allies, the better. And once again, and Mark, thank you so much for your activism. Thank you for educating everybody, and I really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate it. Stella, would you talk to what she said? Because I think that there's a lot of times that education is not touched on, and we don't get the education in terms of like learning our history that the allies can learn and other people can learn. Because a lot of times that's not covered in our school systems. And I know you've been a proponent of trying to get it done more in the school system. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that. And also, I know that we recently had that person who, I won't say his name, but he's the one that currently occupies the White House. But he did this whole thing about trying to like reclaim the term cultural wars. Like we were talking about cultural wars years ago, but I think the context we were putting it in was totally different than the way he was using it when he went to Mount Rushmore. So if you would talk a little bit about that as well, Stella.
So there's a lot of interesting things in the conversation that Sarah just espoused. First of all, why Middle Eastern people are white is because there's a Supreme Court ruling that says Middle Eastern people are white. Back at the turn of the century, there was a case where a Syrian, I can't remember the case name. When you get my age, you don't have to remember case names. You just need to remember the stories. You young folks go look it up. But there was a Syrian man who applied to be designated white. And so Middle Easterners are designated Caucasians for purposes of the census. Now, the cultural reality is that people in the Middle East bounce from white to non-white depending on the war, the time, and the country. Okay? And right now, y'all are not white. You're not treated as white. You're not treated as an individual country. The Middle Easterners have various stereotypes that are placed on you, but these things put your community in danger. And if your community does not understand that it is in danger, it is going to be shocked. Because those who hate, they don't just hate us, they hate all of us. They hate the America that we want to be, which is multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and joyful. We want to be the melting pot of promise, right? Here you have a administration that wants to take the words off the Statue of Liberty and say, oh, those words weren't meant for anybody but white Europeans. That's not what that statue says. That's not what it means. The Statue of Liberty does not. It says, give me you're tired and you're poor. And those hoping to be free. That's refugees. That's not the rich who can afford to pay $500,000 to come to America and get citizenship. And so we need to make sure that many of our arriving first generation brothers and sisters to America, they don't know the vile history of our nation. As all they know is that shining city on a hill. And believe me, it is a shiny city, but scratch. Just beneath the veneer, it's a little, we hide a lot with that shiny stuff. That veneer is beautiful, but we want to make it real. And we want the new arriving citizens and residents to help us make that real. And so I'm always fascinated by the internal cultures as well, the Afro-Iranians versus the Sunnis and the Shias and the Kurds. There's so much interplay. The Persians and the non-Persians, there's the interplay is so interesting. But our history as a humanity is there in that country, Persia, the seven wonders of the world. All that civilization is built on is from that region. And yet we don't have a cultural understanding of. Americans barely speak American English, let alone understand languages outside of our culture. You can get us, and so we have so little understanding of our own history, let alone world history and the role we play in the world and how the world evolved, right? Iran is not some construct of the European colonization. It was a civilization. It ruled the world for eons. The world was based and centered there. And so we need to learn real stuff in school, not fairy tales. George Washington did not chop down the cherry tree and say, "Father, I cannot tell a lie." We need to get that out of the book and put some real history in.
I would love, yes, absolutely. I don't remember learning anything about the Middle East in the entire 12 years I was in school. And, my, education, it was a public school, but it was also kind of, I guess, lauded in the area for being, a really good school. But yeah, and not just we didn't learn too much about South America. Really, I remember it just centered around both American and European history. And I really think that, it's not really doing the population any favor. And the education system. And also, I'm a little bit, we talk about the history, it's almost, I'm sorry, I word this correctly. It's almost like we haven't learned from our history. We see what has happened in Iraq, in Syria. I was in Iran visiting family 6 months ago when the administration, did kill the Soleimani, one of the Iranian generals. We thought World War III was going to start. And I remember, I was actually there, and I remember listening to citizens and everyone kind of whispering, talking to my family, well, what's going to happen? How are you going to leave? Where will you seek refuge? And just thinking, I know there's a ban right now. They wouldn't be able to come here. Europe has definitely increased, in both anti-Semitism and homophobia. It was a very, very scary time, but it's almost like, why didn't we see what happened in a lot of other with the war with Iraq? This would cost billions of dollars. It would cost so many lives. It was just really shocking to me how the administration didn't take history into consideration. So, thank you so much for covering that. And I really, really hope we have a reform in our education system, because we're not doing our population any favors by keeping everyone in the dark. And this includes, I think, a lot of American citizens who, are college educated. We think, someone who went to college, they took this sort of class, but it's actually really not. And so,
yeah, she actually brings up a good point. The fact that our own education isn't doing that great of a job. And then I heard earlier today that they're saying that 1 out of 3 or some ridiculous amount of folks are about to foreclose on their mortgage because of what's going on in the current economic crisis and things of that nature. I know, Stella, you've been involved in a lot of that kind of work as well. So if you would share a little bit about your concerns as far as the economic crisis that we're in, because we're definitely in an economic crisis. So I would like to hear from you, Stella, as to what you think, because I heard that figure, like like 30% of the people will foreclose on their mortgage this year.
Yeah, that's actually going to be true. It's going to, there's so many failures of this administration that are pushing these things to fruition. One, we did not, and they flow into each other, and as a result, there's going to be this catastrophic failure. And the question is are they going to delay the catastrophe until after the elections, and then whoever's in the White House in January has to deal with it? It's on the new president's watch, or it goes into this one's second watch, or is it unsustainable and it's going to happen ahead of time? You have to have jobs, so it's a cycle, right? You have to have jobs to have money to pay rent and to pay mortgages. That's a fact. You have to have a job to do that. So we have to get the economy back in play. But it makes no sense to get the economy back and force it back without dealing with the issue that's causing it, right? You got to deal with the root cause. And the root cause of this is the virus. So we need to put your mask on, right? Wash your hands and stay away from people if you can, right? At least 6 feet away. Stay away from me, except by Zoom. Now that's a simple thing. It's not a big ask. It's not a big ask to ask you to put a mask on and to socially distance. It's not a big ask. And Lord, I hope you were washing your hands before. But if not, we can tell who's washing their hands and who's not by whose hands are ashy and whose hands are not. It's okay. See, I'm doing the jokes, Sarah. I'm doing the jokes.
Wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. Bernetta had made a comment
but we're facing, and now we don't even have, what we have now is we have the federal government, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who control most of the loans, giving forbearance and extending that out about 6 months, and you can get a second one that'll extend it out a year. But you have to ask for it. They're not giving it to you. You have to ask for it. If you have not asked, if you have lost your job or can't make your mortgage payment and you are underwater facing foreclosure, call your servicer and ask for the forbearance. Ask for it. But all that does is delay the day you pay. It just pushes it further down the hill. At some point, you got to pay Peter. You got to pay the piper.
Yep.
But right now, let's keep people in their homes. This is not a time with COVID out here for this massive homelessness. The other thing that we have going on is that Wall Street is now our landlord, not Miss Mary across the street. And Wall Street landlords don't care about the fact you don't have the rent. They're going, as soon as these moratoriums on evictions come up, soon as the moratorium ends, they're putting you out in the street.
Wow. Fernando had a couple of comments. First off, he said diversity was the cast of Taxi television show. That's what Trump thinks is diversity. And then he also said the dark ages of Europe was the golden age of MENA and Africa. And then he said, how did they transition into the economy after the Spanish influenza? Lessons learned. He said the 20s were raging no. So it definitely sounds like we should be learning some of the lessons even from 100 years ago and everything. So, Sheila, for those that are watching for the first time, and I know Fernando's involved in economic development and activism and stuff as well. And I also want to hear from Sarah, her journey. It's a shorter journey, but Jill, I'd like you to tell how you got involved in the work that you do. Like I said, I've known you to be a civil rights advocate for a number of years. I know you've been at Moral Monday marches and a lot of other things. So I'd also like to hear what you think of Reverend Barber's Poor People's March, because I know he's the Poor People's Campaign, because I know he's definitely trying to get that back going again. But I'd just like to hear your take on how you got involved and some other comments along those lines.
It's a family business. We've been doing civil rights for generations. I'm actually a fourth generation college-educated woman, so you know that my family's been engaged in activism for a long time. My grandfather's C.E. Askew was a founding member of SCLC, so my mother was the first Black teacher to teach in an all-white school in the state of North Carolina, so you kind of know that's kind of the family business. As it relates to Reverend Barber and the Poor People's March, I am so hopeful. I think COVID slowed it down, but it also highlighted the need. So I think it's given him a bigger platform for him to show. It's one thing to talk about and march about and go to jail about the closing of rural hospitals. But when you see the bodies stacked up in rural communities because there's no hospital beds for COVID patients, and they're asking for refrigerator trucks because there's no place to put the bodies, then that brings home that we weren't playing. We weren't talking out of our heads. This was a real emergency. When you look at North Carolina, where 45% of the cases, hear me, 45% of the cases are in the Hispanic community, and you got to look around to find somebody Hispanic. But 45% of the cases are coming from less than 10% of the population. This tells you that this Poor People's March, that this coalition of Black, brown, and white folks and other community folks coming together to talk about poor people, okay, is so important. The media talks about the middle class, and they use the figure $150,000. That is not the median income in America. That is not middle class. The median income in America is $54,000 a year per household, not per individual, per household. The media fools us into thinking that middle class is more than it is. And we're all a half a paycheck, as we have now discovered, now that we're 3 months behind, from poverty, from being displaced, from foreclosure, from eviction. Our bad habits have been exposed, and Reverend Barber has been trying to get us to see this without having to pay this price. But hopefully they will, he's so magnanimous, he won't say, I told you so. But he is still working towards solutions. So I'm so proud of the work he's doing.
And one of the things that I've got to say is that he's built a really big coalition. It's not just been among the people of color, but it's also, as you mentioned, the folks that are our allies that might be white and other things. But he's also built it, as you mentioned earlier, across religious divide. So he's got Muslim brothers, even though he's a Christian minister, but he's got Muslim brothers and Jewish brothers and other brothers and sisters that are helping him as well. He's also gone across the gender divide, because we do know that there is sexism in America as well, and he's gone across the orientation divide, because there's definitely people across the LGBTI, whatever of the other initials there are, communities, but he's definitely reached across those boundaries as well. Sarah, and I want to hear from you as well, how you got involved in doing your comedy. Stella tried to steal your thunder and do a joke, so you get to do a joke right now and everything as well. So I wanted to hear how you got involved with. Also, you're a woman, and you are, whether America wants to acknowledge it or not, but a lot of the rest of society would call you a woman of color. So how did you get involved in the comedy world, and definitely what got you into this thing? Like you said, you're a fairly young lady, but you're definitely still making noise. I met you through my friend Mona when you appeared on her show.
Yes. Oh, Mona was like a big sister to me. Yeah, I started comedy about 4 years ago. A classmate of mine was actually down at the time, and he had a show at the Comedy Store, and I went and checked it. I'd always wanted to, initially I came out to LA to do graduate school. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a writer. I still do, but then I was like, wow, stand-up comedy, that's like combining both of those worlds. And, I went to a couple of open mics, and I've just been going ever since, and I really love the comedy. Not just for kind of fighting for the same dream, but what I love the real diversity in the comedy community. There's everybody, white, black, Jewish, Latino, anybody from the LGBTQ spectrum. We've got, comedians with special needs, physical disability, autism. One thing that I actually noticed when I moved out to Los Angeles was that everyone talks about some city like LA being so diverse. And when you come out here, you don't see a melting pot. You kind of see, well, everyone's kind of in the corner, but they don't really interact. On the comedy community, it is a melting pot, because we're all on the same show. We're all hanging out in the room together. Everyone's, a really good friend. And that's just what I love about it. I don't think I've ever had that experience before. Obviously, in Ohio, where 93%, I was the only Muslim Middle Eastern student in my high school. And coming out here, where it's like, okay, well, tonight is it hanging out with the Persian friends, or everyone is just kind of in their own corner. And especially when it comes to interracial relationships and dating and marriage, a lot of people are still way like, oh, I could never. But that's why I love it. I'm able to express my art and be able to build relationships and people from all over the country, every background. And, I know for sure many Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of us are still posting about Breonna Taylor asking for justice. I mean, you have to. It's like, as Stella had mentioned earlier, we're all in this together. And yeah, I do have access yet, but I do know in the Iranian community, I have a lot of followers. Not just Iranian, but Iran as well. And they were actually reaching out and asking about the Black Lives Matter movement. And, I took it upon myself to kind of, I guess, help educate the best that I could. Actually, there were memorials of us deployed in cities like Mashhad, Iran. So it is acknowledged. It is acknowledged. And I think Iranian people and Middle Eastern people in general, I think, taking it upon themselves to do better, because we have to. It's it's a non-negotiable. And yeah, I'm just doing Zoom shows now, and we're making of it. But actually, I'm wondering if I could ask, because I've been struggling, what can people do for have to stay inside, we have to social distance, otherwise we'll go away. How do you deal with mental health? To be honest, I'm going crazy the last week. I don't know what to do. Doing podcasts like this, it's acting with people that's helping go. I don't know for how much longer for how much longer can we continue to do this? Because depression is already pandemic in the U.S. I can how it's been magnified with stay-at-home order.
So it's simple and it's hard. Okay. If we wear a mask, wash our hands, and socially distance outside, we can hang out 6 feet apart, right? But if we don't do those 3 fundamental things, then people like me are locked down. And there is a depression. I was working from home prior to COVID, but I didn't realize how much going to Lowe's and Home Depot and shopping at Ross meant to me. Right? I had no idea that was such an important thing. For my mental health, I have been baking and raking. I have been baking all kinds of cakes and cookies, and I have a repertoire now, and I have been gardening. I have this huge cucumber that I've grown that I'm like, oh, look at my cucumber. And I will tell you that my homegrown garden salad tastes better than any salad I have ever purchased. But there's only so much baking and raking you can do, right? And so there is a need for some just mental relaxation. Just rest your mind. Do something. Stay away from the cable news because it will make you crazy. It really will. Watch it for an hour and a half a day, in an hour and a half block, and you will have seen everything you need to see. I suggest you start at 12 so you don't miss Governor Cuomo and Dr. Fauci, and then stop at 2 o'clock. Trust me, the rest of the day, all they're going to do is rinse and repeat what happened from 12 to 2. And just, find something. I've learned a lot about alien astronauts, ancient aliens. Find a channel that's just cray-cray and let your mind go, just trash TV for a few hours. But I have found that I've actually been on more Zoom calls than I knew Zoom could do. I was on a call earlier this morning where the woman was so zoomed out. She was like, look, I'm building in 15-minute break between Zoom calls, right? Like when you have them back to back. So it's not a 1 to 2 o'clock call. She schedules a 1 to 1:45 call. So she can at least go, and take a break. But the mental strain of this crisis is overwhelming. And I do understand that. But the solution is so simple. Put your mask on, wash your hands, and stay 6 feet from other people. If everybody does that, we can be back to work. We can be back in school. We can pay our bills, and we can take that stress. There's stress associated with, can I pay my bills? Am I going to be homeless in 30 days? There's a lot of stress that's relieved if we will just do these 3 things. What? Put on your mask, wash your hands, and stay 6 feet from each other.
It makes a lot of sense to me. But Stella, I do have a question to ask you, which is, who would have thought that a very popular PBS show would be as big as it is now in terms of the name of a electronic tool and everything? Because when they first talked to Zoom, what I remembered of Zoom was the old PBS show. The old PBS show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. You got to Zoom and all of that. So, yeah, you're much too young to know about that one, Sarah. But now, Sarah, the question I've got to ask you and everything is, how are you coping? Because you're a young lady, and I'm 58. I'm still very much in that single world, but I can cope. I'm old, so I can go a long time without a relationship. But you're a young lady, and there's very little dating going on. So I'm thinking that your dating life is having a hard time in this whole COVID world.
Funny enough, I actually downloaded Tinder this morning and got banned within 10 minutes. And I didn't even do anything. I don't know why they banned me, but I wish one good thing did come out of it. I've been having a lot of FaceTime, a lot of Zoom dates, where it's just focused on talking to the person. We're not doing anything. We're, especially, I have my qualms about that. Men in Los Angeles love to physically move forward very quickly. That was a struggle that I definitely dealt with, but it's really nice to kind of go on different Zoom dates, and it's a time saver because dating in Los Angeles, well, you have to put on your makeup, you have to get dressed, you have to, if a halfway big city, it usually you're calling off a night where I could be at open mic network or this, and so I know that this has been one of the biggest changes with COVID for me. Is even after coronavirus, I want to be at least the first or second date to a FaceTime date. Really feel the person out, really see if I like them, and it's worth kind of getting to know in person. And so that's kind of a blessing in disguise, I guess. That for sure. But of course, yes, everyone. I've read so many articles about how, and being close to someone is a physiological need, and how I read something earlier about broken heart syndrome and how that is actually a new thing. I believe it's brought on by emotional stress, and a lot of people are having it now because of the pandemic, and it really is scary because we don't know when a vaccine is going to come. Actually, my close friend does in neuroscience. She is working with scientists on a vaccine. No, it could be 2 years, but all I know is that the next time I can do live stand-up comedy or step into a nightclub. So it's been a serious struggle. I will say, I had some panic attacks. I have maybe lost myself in more wine than I should have the last few weeks because it's tough on everybody. But sometimes, some days, if all you did was survive, then that's good enough.
Yeah, that's true. You just gotta have that whole survival mentality and everything of that nature. But I was also wondering because Iran, I know some of the other parts of the Middle East are very much about the arranged marriage. So I'm thinking, are your parents trying to do that whole arranged thing with you, or are you actually able to go find a date of your own? I do know a lot of the Middle Eastern cultures are about arranged marriages.
No, my parents are not at all in the, you have to marry someone from the same religious or Iranian background. They like to stick by whoever's a good person, like that. I will say I'm 27 years old. I'm going to be 28 next month. My mom's been putting on a little bit of pressure. You should get married, and I was actually just discussing with her. So I actually started looking at marriage a very different way about a year ago. Growing up in Middle Eastern culture, to be honest, they do kind of treat you like, well, a woman isn't whole married, or life doesn't you get married because they're traveling with your husband and this, that, and the other. But I started really comedy and thought and said, you know what, this is what I'm dedicating my life to. We make it or we die. Marriage I kind of now see it kind of just a piece of paper, and I don't think it's healthy at all to be strapped down to, okay, by this age I need to get married, by this age I need to have a child, or if I even want children. It's, I think, kind of just, I'm viewing it more as you're building something with somebody versus, oh, this person is going to complete you. And I think it's one of the biggest favors I did for myself. And it's taken the pressure off of dating, and it's a beautiful thing. Passion becomes your number one priority, the comedy, and also, justice for women of color in comedy. Actually, I wanted to ask a little bit about, so we obviously know there's racism in Hollywood, but one thing that's been on my mind a lot is tokenization. We already have one African-American on this TV show. Do we really, we don't need it. We already have one Middle Eastern show. Because I do actually have who they have shows about, Senator Muslim character, and the network, I can't say the name of the network, but we already have that, only one allowed. In a way, I'm also thinking it's a little more damaging than racism, because I've actually seen a little bit of it, with some of my fellow compatriots of Iranian or Middle Eastern background. And, instead of kind of helping each other out, I've noticed a little bit of standoffishness and coldness, this feeling, this fear of, you have to be the first, you have to be the one, because then, the industry doesn't want you anymore. They don't want you anymore. And I was kind of, in your industry, what do you think about tokenization? How can we fight it?
Stella, how would you take tokenization in the civil rights movement? And that actually plays into part of what I was going to ask you as well, because you came from a family, and I know this because my mom has definitely got a rich history, as does dad and everything. But how did you go into being that fourth generation? Because sometimes if you come in as another generation, you've already had generations ahead of you, then sometimes there's that pressure to succeed. I know that I sometimes feel that pressure because who my mom is, having run the Golden Lee Foundation, who my dad is as an artist, everything is. But I was wondering if you felt that and everything, that whole kind of like pressure, even when you first got involved, because of the success of your parents and grandparents.
Oh, yeah, the pressure was overwhelming. Because you have legacy, and then you're also facing the the fight against tokenism. Mark, you and I, we were the first of our families to integrate traditionally white spaces. And we were the ones who were invited into those spaces because we were the tokens. We were we could, what's the word they use for us, Mark? We were articulate.
Yes.
Now you say to a Black person, an educated Black person, that person is articulate. That's racist. Just so you know. So tokenism, though, has its place. Somebody's got to be first. Okay? Somebody's got to occupy that space, and how you occupy that space expands or contracts that space for others. What you don't want to be is the "I told you so" person in that space, right? But it also it can be used as a power tool, or it can be used, it can be meaningless. If you get in that space and you just occupy it, right? You're just safe, milquetoast in the middle of the road. Nothing's going to happen except they're going to put you were the first person in that space, right? That's a token. Oh, we've had one. Oh, I know that person, right? But if you're the first person in that space and you see yourself as a point on the spear, that's different. And so it is hard for people to give up that specialness, because what they say to you is, oh, we don't mean you. You're special. You're different. And if you embrace that versus no, this is my culture. This is who we are, as opposed to this is who I am. You can expand that space and help each other out. But there's still tokenism. I'm 62 years old, and they're still saying every week I see the first Black person congratulate so-and-so for being the first Black whatever. Okay, so it takes, that's why I'm so excited about Sarah and other young activists, and in every space. You own your space, right? You don't have to be in the street in my space. You be the activist on that stage, right? Talking about gender issues facing women of color, talking about gender issues facing Iranian women, talking about religious confusion when you come and Lord, the cultural confusion of coming from Ohio to Los Angeles. You got comedy gold, okay? Stay in, own your space, live your space, and let others, but be an ally and an accomplice to people in their other spaces. And I thank you for all that you have done around the Black Lives Matter movement, but tokenism is just part of the plan.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, and she's definitely breaking the mold, no doubt about that. So what was it like moving from, or your parents moving from the Middle East to Ohio, and you from Ohio to Los Angeles? Because I'm imagining, like Stella said, those had to be some serious culture shocks, because you had some serious culture shocks.
Very much so. So my dad came in the mid-'70s before the revolution, just a few years before the Islamic Revolution. And of course, there was the hostage crisis, and there was a lot of that going on. And so, he dealt with and the racism. So that's actually why I noted, whenever my dad hears something, he's a college professor, but if he hears about something, racism or something like that going on, he's always the first to speak up because he experienced it firsthand against Iran. My mom was in Iran or with Iraq, and, still deals with PTSD. Sounds of like loud sirens and bombings and stuff. My family loves America, where I'm very, very blessed to be able to do comedy here. And I'm not just talking about anywhere in the Middle East. I'm talking about even like I was in France, because when you've made it in America, you've made it worldwide. And I just feel like we have all these opportunities. I actually had connected to some Iranian stand-up comedians, and there's a main headliner. She's a woman, and she's my age, and she comes from a very conservative city. And so, just hearing about battles and how she tried to do comedy, and there's so much, you have permission from the government to perform here. You are not allowed to make fun of certain things, and so they have even more hoops to jump through than I could ever. And so it's very interesting, learning about the different perspectives. One thing that I'm focused on right now is I'm building a new pilot. I have a pilot called Saffron and Rose, 2 Persian girls, and kind of what they're dealing with living on an American campus. That's actually kind of why I asked about tokenization, because for this next pilot, I was talking to my story developer, and this pilot is, it's still me playing the main character, but she's a lot less Persian, which is kind of like, oh my goodness, will this be a good sell? Is it ethnic enough, or is it too ethnic? I guess when you're in my position, you're kind of always going back and forth between, well, is it too am I indifferent enough to be special, or am I not relatable? Sorry, I didn't mean to go off tangent there.
No problem at all. And I can see what you're saying. But I was just curious, when your dad heard about coming back to the Corona crisis, I'm imagining that he probably was seeing some parallels between what happened with the Iranians and folks of that nature and what we've been doing with the Chinese, in the sense of like automatically stereotyping them because of the disease supposedly having started in that location. And then we had these stereotypes about Chinese folks in general. So I'm thinking that when you talk to your dad, there was a lot of parallels.
Yeah. It's the racism that people have dealt with. I actually did the Crazy Woke Asians comedy festival a couple of months ago. It's run by who's another young comedian. She's an immigrant from China, very funny. Just seeing their, dealing with physical violence, discrimination, just going to a pizza shop, ordering a pizza, and having the manager kind of turn them away or ignore them. It's really disgusting. And, I my dad, he never stands for any such thing. Even I catch myself. So Iranian Americans, people who grew up here, we like to sometimes call our cousins or people new from Iran fresh off. And it's not It's meant kind of as we kind of joke around with, make fun, that a little bit. And I know my dad actually got angry. He's like, why would you even call them that? I mean, I was like, oh, well, that is just a thing. I was born here. It's like, well, good for you. I recognize that. And I myself, even in my comedy, I try not to make fun of the accent too much. I'm obviously, because I'm thinking that it might kind of look to the racism tropes. I mean, it's interesting because Iranian love we put on stuff, but sometimes it may when you're saying it to a main audience. So, I mean, I've always been in comedy, but I'm still trying to find my voice. As far as from Ohio, well, I'm much happier in Los Angeles. I love the diversity. I love this brotherhood and sisterhood that I found in the comedy community, and having the opportunity to be on podcasts with people like Marc and people like Stella. As Stella mentioned earlier, it's a privilege to get to do that, to get to have a platform, and to, get to be able to do stuff like this and hear different perspectives. And so, I do have some friends. This isn't to say that everybody is like that, but I do occasionally see, there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who are still in support of the Confederate flag. And, I just wonder, have they had the chance to be exposed to different perspectives? Would they think different? I just had a conversation with one of my close friends from Ohio, and how she left actually a workspace because nearly everyone there was posting about how it's wrong to take it, and it's just, you think about, we can only speak for our own lives and our own education, but I guess that, again, it shows how important there is to be educating the masses.
Yeah, definitely. So, Stella, what do you think about the whole thing with the Confederate monuments and us taking them down, and even some of our supposed world history people having their names taken down, whether that's Thomas Jefferson, whether that's Woodrow Wilson, whether that's whoever, and some of the movements to move things. I just read earlier today that the Redskins are thinking about not being the Redskins anymore. They're going to change their name, the football team, because of some of the conversations that are going on. But I just think to know what your thoughts were in terms of like changing some of these names and everything.
I am very supportive of taking down symbols of hatred. I am very supportive of removing statues of colonization and oppression. The Washington football team name should have been changed in at least 40 years ago, when there was an awakening in the Native community around the usage and caricature of their community. That other people can decide what is appropriate for your community. Oh, well, it doesn't hurt you. Really? Oh, I'm not insulting you. Really? If I say that I am insulted, then guess what? I am. Whether you meant to do it or not. And so, but the Confederate flag that they fly, that wasn't even a flag in the actual Civil War. That was not the battle flag. That was a flag that was raised during Jim Crow to terrify Black people. That was its purpose. That's why it was adopted. You got to know your history, understand the background. It's not your heritage. Is it your heritage to be a traitor? Because that's what the Confederacy was. It was a traitor. They are traitors. If being a traitor to this country is what you want to claim as your legacy, you have violated the Constitution. You have declared an allegiance to a issue other than the United States. That's the violation of the oath you take when you take office. Understand, we don't teach civics anymore. in the school system. There's not an understanding of what the roles of government are. People talk about the Second Amendment like it starts with the Second Amendment and it doesn't start with the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the freedom to assemble and challenge your nation. So you're going to turn guns on me and tear gas me so you can go and do a photo op and not even get it right on the steps of a church? You don't understand. You're going to let a foreign nation put a bounty on the heads of our military, but you're going to turn the National Guard and the Army on me for standing up for my life. Black Lives Matter every day. And we will defend them every day. And we're going to take those symbols of hatred down every day.
I agree. Yeah. And what do you think about the defund the police movement? Because I know that's been part of the Black Lives Matter too. Do you think that we need to reform the police as well?
So this is something I was talking about real early in the conversation. We need to be careful about who tags the work. The work that's being done around the action plan, the agenda behind the slogan has been in place for years. There is major reform that needs to be done. There are 8, and Sarah, maybe you can help me with it. I can't get the slogan right, but the 8 for 8 right now, or 8 for 8, that movement, they got 8 policies. Let me put it that way. Simple policies. This is not hard stuff. This is like washing your hands, putting your face mask on, staying 6 feet away. No chokeholds. Okay, that's one, right? Adopt a police commission. Be transparent about actions. Have a review board. They have a simple agenda of 8 items they've been trying to get passed for years. Houston adopted it, and several other cities adopted it, and we're in the process of adopting it. And what it requires is that you transfer funds and take the resource officers out of the schools. That you transfer funds from the police department to addressing the root causes of what's going on in school. And a lot of that is just the criminalization of culture. Mm-hmm. You criminalize culture. Well, if you stop doing that, we'd have half this problem solved, right? Baggy pants is a crime in Southern communities, wearing your pants baggy. That's a cultural thing. Children being loud in classrooms. If you're loud and in a classroom and you're white, you're just ADD and boisterous and you have a big imagination. If you're the same age, same child, but a different color, you're on suspension. You might be handcuffed. You might have the police called on you. So we have to stop. So the defund the police movement was a movement before there was a hashtag. And the hashtag really doesn't capture the policy agenda of the movement. But I support the policy agenda of the movement.
Bless you.
Not crazy about the hashtag.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, and I'd like to hear both of your takes on this, and I brought it up earlier on the conversation and everything, but that's one of the things that people are talking about is how we might be getting caught up in the symbolism and not necessarily the policies. I think that's one of the things the ESPN anchor was talking about when he was saying get together those, and he used the example of either NBA players or NFL players that are making tens of millions or, several millions of dollars, and then putting a portion of that money and then using that money to actually attack policy issues and to actually bring up policy changes, whether that, he called it the Black PAC, but that was just a name he created right there off the top of his head. But whether it was creating a black PAC or political action committee or whatever, but using some of these athletes, and I would even argue entertainers like what Sarah is, because there are a number of those in the Hollywood community as well that have that kind of power, but aren't necessarily using that power. I mean, we've got great people like LeBron James that is doing that kind of like great work and everything, but he was just urging more of our folks to do that in our community. So I'd like to hear from both of you, Stella and Sarah. What do you think of that concept of us trying to get our folks to actually put their money where their mouth is? Trying to make sure I had the expression right.
Yeah. As far as police reform, well, one thing that I was actually I have actually seen suggestions of is that I do know that I believe in Europe, in many of the countries, police training takes about 2 years. I believe in the U.S. it's about 6 months, but a little bit, obviously there should be an extension on that. And even saw the suggestion that all people training to be police should be required to take sociology courses, or psychology courses, and also certain courses. I'm not sure. Would it be sociology where they are learning about the struggles of, I guess, people of color and like that? I actually wanted, because I had wanted actually, while talking about education, I had wanted to jump back to the, when we were talking about the Confederate flag, there was a tweet actually by a comedian. I don't remember who the comedian was, but this just shows how education is important, because he had actually tweeted, he's like, it's so sad that all of the Hitler Nazi statues were taken down from Germany, because now we'll never know what happened during Nazi Germany. And so it's kind of like, you don't need these statues. You don't, it's our history. It's our heritage. We talk about those in the history books. We educate people. You don't need, symbols of hate to educate people. You just need to read about it in textbooks to learn. But yeah, as far as police reform goes, I think it would be great to add certain education courses to extend the training, and of course, no chokeholds, and the body cams should always be on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of that idea, Stella, of the kind of our elite coming together? I mean, kind of almost using the Black Wall Street model of us actually having some of our elite actually use their force of power and some of their money to actually try to make a change.
I think that is a powerful concept that some have already. There is actually a Black PAC that it does exist. It's been in existence at least since 2000. But I think that it's not just the elite that needs to do that. We need to be conscious as people of color of who controls our money and our resources and our finances. And we have, as we now know, we have sufficient Black billionaires and millionaires and thought leaders, and that we can come together and should come together to try to establish our own solutions in cooperation with allies, but it's Black-led solutions to our community's problems in terms of a policy-shaping agenda and that type of thing. We also need to look locally at what we can control and how we, what do we do? So you may think you need to be in one of the major top 10 banks to be able to get all of the resources that you need for your business or for your personal usage. But that doesn't mean that you can't put 10% or 20% into minority financial institutions. We're fortunate in Durham that we have Mechanics and Farmers Bank, which is 112 years old and is one of, and has but could use a strong base, because who do they lend their money to but minority businesses? That's their bread and butter. That's who gets their loans. So let's deposit our savings at least there so that they can lend more money. So these are the kinds of, we have the tools We have the intelligence. We have the resources. If you took all of the income and spending power of the African American, just the African American community, we would be the 7th largest economy in the world. So now who's benefiting from that economy, right? It ain't us. So we need to sit down and think about how do we redirect that income and that because we are making the economy work. 7th largest economy in the world. Now we need to make that work for us. And COVID gives you time to ponder things that you might not have been had time to do. And then if we collaborate with the economies of the European model is new in terms of centuries, right? If we collaborate as people of color around the world to change the model, change the paradigm, right? And rather than have Africa be exploited for its natural resources without benefiting from the gold and the silver and the diamonds you can't make a computer without the natural resources coming out of Africa, right? How do we make sure that the African people benefit from that money rather than the international bank? So, I'm going to give you a sack of wheat for a stack of diamonds. Not fair. Not fair trade. We need to think about that.
Yep, and I think that we're also not developing the natural allies that we could develop. I don't know that we've done enough in terms of reaching. I mean, I know that definitely Reverend Barber is and some others, but I don't know that we as a people have done enough reaching into the Latin American community, reaching into the Native community, when a lot of us have Native ancestry as part of our own ancestry, but I don't know that we've done enough reaching into those communities or even reaching into our Asian brothers and sisters in terms of like building powerful alliances, because those are definitely things that we could be doing in terms of reaching and creating some natural alliances that already exist based on our shared history, our shared fight against imperialism, and shared a lot of other things that we had to do together during these times.
Let me give a shout out to my Native family members, the Halawasaponi tribe. They're my Native family.
Yep. Got to give a shout out to them. And I have those in my family as well. My cousin Verna is actually going out and doing those powwows. She's not doing as many now because of COVID, but she was definitely a major competitor and has her school going on in Halifax County, the dance school that she's got going on. So definitely I agree with you. Got to give a major shout out to that family as well. And by the way, to your point, Fernando, who's still commenting on us on a regular basis, said that the officer that killed Floyd was a training officer. So he wasn't even a regular officer. He was a training officer is what he has learned. And like I said, he's involved in that community. He also said that the General Lee was one of the main characters of the Duke of Hazzard. And we as children celebrated Southern culture, not knowing at the time the representation of that symbol. So I agree. Definitely a lot of folks remember the Dukes of Hazzard and remember wanting to get that speedy car and things of that nature, but they weren't thinking about what that meant. And then he also said that we might even want to disempower the police unions. And he added that Robert Smith is an excellent leader. So that was an example he was given of an excellent leader and everything. So those are some of the comments that Fernando was sharing with us, because like I said, he is one of our regular listeners. So we definitely appreciate that.
And Mark, we were talking about spending the wealth. As far as the Iranian community that I can say, I mean, really, I think at this point, we have to just start really basic with educating, learning to identify as a minority, because the reality is that Middle Eastern, even for our own causes, we have a money, our own lobbies. And I think that's rooted in some of sectarianism, whether that's violent or not. In Iran, very staunch divide and Republican Iran. It mainly stems back to the way the administration deals with the Iranian government. Some of us have family, some of us don't, and people have different opinions. Without going too far to go back and visit, but Yeah, so I do. Learning to identify as a minority is kind of that first step we can take, because the Middle Eastern people in the U.S. at least are pretty wealthy, and so it's kind of just a matter of seeing how we can allocate those resources and build an allyhood.
Yeah, definitely. We've got to do that, build those allyhood. And a lot of the issues that even y'all face in Iran and a lot of the Asian cultures face as well are issues that we've had to deal with as well. Most of the folks that are like my complexion, a lot of times we would be mistaken for Middle Eastern and things of that nature. And a lot of times there is a lot of colorism that still exists, unfortunately, in America even now. And I'm sure that Stella could even talk to that as well, because even though she's of the Alawa descent, we do know that there has some Alawa family in her bloodline. We do know that there's a lot of colorism. I know that in the school that I went to, which was John Graham High School, we actually had, and I found out from a friend of mine that it was this recently, I graduated in 1980 by high school, and I remember that many years later, so it might have been in the 90s, a distant cousin, like a second or third cousin, was the Halawa contestant. So we actually had at John Graham, and then it probably became even during Warrenton High School, 3 beauty queens. So there was a white beauty queen, there was a black beauty queen, and there was a Native American beauty queen. So I don't know whether that's still going on in the 21st century, but I do know that it continued as recently as probably the late 80s and the early 90s.
Marc Lee, from Warrenton?
Yep, Warrenton.
You know my Uncle X and my Aunt May?
Kind of. The name sounds vaguely familiar. I may know them. I have to go back and to figure out whether I know them or not. But yeah, I was in Warrenton, John Graham, because I was the next to the last class in John Graham. I think I was supposed to have been the last class, which would have been 1980. Well, I graduated in 1980. We were supposed to be the last class, but the last class was actually 81. So since 81 to now, it's been Warrenton High School, which was John Graham and Norlana merged together.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was wondering
what were you saying, Sarah?
If there was a type of sectarianism within the African American community, as far as like dark skin versus light skin. Yeah. What about Christian versus Muslim? I know there's a very large population of Black Muslims, and I was just curious about within your own community, you know, if there is there more of an allyship, or is there still a lot of work to be done? Is there a lot of advice?
It's my understanding, and I would like to hear Stella's view on this as well, but I do think that there's been attempts to reach out and to have the Muslim and the Christian communities unify and to do things together, and there is some of that goes on in our community, but there is still some divisions, because unfortunately, as we know, and we've alluded to it in this conversation, the greatest tool in terms of the greatest tactic in any war, and whether it's whatever kind of war, whether it's a cultural war, whether it's a military war, or whatever the type of war is, the greatest tactic to defeat somebody is divide and conquer. So definitely the forces that have been masters at that, whether it's dividing people based on religion, orientation. I sometimes think, and it's just my personal take, that that's one of the great faults of our Black church, because it takes one passage within the Bible and it carries it too far to the extreme. And because of that, a lot of our LGBT community folks are disenfranchised, I'll put it that way, from the Black church, because certain Black churches don't want to deal with them because they feel that lifestyle is against them or a sin or whatever they want to consider it. So I think that becomes an issue even between, like, say, the Christian church and some of our LGBT community. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just another divide and conquer tactic, whether it's that or dividing us from our Mexican brothers or our Latin brothers. And that's one of the other things that I oftentimes talk about, is the fact that we sometimes try to put everybody into like these large boxes. Like we talked about the need to reach out to Africa, and I agree, we definitely need to reach out to Africa, but we need to realize that when we reach out to Africa, that Africa isn't one country. Just like I love the term Latinx for young Latin American folks that are about like your age, Sarah, and everything. But then a lot of times when folks use it, they forget that that's a whole region. That includes Mexico, Honduras, Brazil. I could go on naming several of the countries, but it's not one thing. Because I know sometimes, even I'm in the festival business, and I know sometimes in the festivals they'll be like, let's get a Latin band, and once they get to one Latin band, it might be a calypso. I mean, not calypso. It might be a salsa band, or it might be a whatever the other form of Latin band is, that's it. You got your one, we're done. And I'm like, no, but there's a greater culture here than just that one group representation, because, you know, Brazilian music and Mexican music are two different styles of music. Mexican's a little bit more country oriented in my mind, whereas Brazilian's a little bit more dance oriented. But I mean, but they're still two beautiful styles of music. They just come from a different kind of background. But too often, it's not just the festival world. I would even argue in the political world, you know, sometimes we try to get one person to speak, and if they speak for that community, then we're like, we're done. But no, not realizing that it's a lot of diversity even within those communities. I would imagine the same thing even there in the countries around Iran, because you got Iran, Iraq, and all of that stuff. And I imagine that a lot of times if somebody sees you and you're the one Iranian comedian, they don't go talk to the Iraqi comedian or the Pakistani or the Turkish comedian or some of the others that are in that same general area. Not quite the same area, but the same general area.
Iranians actually, especially in Los Angeles, they only like to, you know, for a comedy show, if you want to get Iranians out to a comedy show, the entire lineup better be just Iranian comedian, not, you know, Arab comedian, Pakistan, you know, they're very, very national in that way, that it's just kind of their own culture. And so, yeah, again, with the allyship, there's a lot of work to be done. You know, you got to ally with other Middle Eastern, and then ally with other people of color, and kind of discuss what can be done further. So there's a lot of that. That's very interesting. I was actually curious, you know, as far as the political divide, you know, Black Democrats versus Black Republicans, like we have Candace Owens. I'm wondering kind of, I don't know too much about the political divide, or if there is a political divide. I mean, I was just very curious about, you know, what that's like and how that's dealt with.
So there used to be real Republicans. There used to be Republicans who had conservative values, whose values were primarily around economic. It was an economic, not socially based, but an economically based party. It got interjected with socially based groups in the 70s, 80s, but it was politicized around religion. So you still had a significant number of African Americans in the Republican Party. Edward Brooks, who wrote the Fair Housing Act, was a Republican. And he was the first Black senator. He was the only Black senator until Cory Booker there was several women in between, but it was a philosophy. Okay. And so, I know and knew many Black activists who were Black power people who believed that we cannot put all our eggs in one basket. We can't put all our votes in the Democratic basket. We needed to be engaged in the Republican Party as well. And they were committed to being Black and the Black agenda and Black economic power through the Republican lens. And we got the Department of Housing and Urban Development was developed through that mechanism. Key leaders came up through that mechanism. Colin Powell in that mechanism, and Condoleezza Rice. I may not agree with her foreign policy perspective, but it was a legitimate perspective. And they never forgot they were Black. They always put forward the Black agenda. So that group of Republicans, that's all I knew until these cray-crays came into place. Now, I put in that genre, Mia Love. She's in that genre I previously talked about. You see, she served one term, right? I used to put Will Hurd in that group. I don't know where he is now. The one I will say that Tim Scott is trying to hold down that spot. He's trying to hold it down all by himself. Candace Owens is a Trumper. She's not a Republican. And we have to separate members of the cult of Trump from the Republican Party, even though the Republican Party has not separated itself from them. What was the Republican Party and what is the Republican Party today are two very different things. And it only took 3 years to do it. And that's the danger, one, of not having influence in both parties. Now you couldn't be black and touch, poor Tim Scott, you couldn't be black and touch the Republican Party with a 10-foot pole. But he's holding it down, trying to be that little point in the spear so that we can come back in but they have lost members. Just as, and the Democrats, I'm going to say this, and then I'll probably never be on another show, Mark, except Republicans are very open about their racism. They're very open about that they see me as a dog or an animal. Okay? On the progressive side, they see me as needing their protection, and they see me as their pet that they need to take care of. But neither one of them sees me as a fully human being. And that's what's so exciting to me, Mark, about this current iteration of young activists, right? It's black-led. You come on and join us. We love you. We want you. Be our ally. Be our accomplice. But this is our show. We make the rules. We decide what the rules are. We decide what's important to us. Y'all are welcome to join. Okay, and that's new, right? Because they were in our generation, and Mark, fix me if I'm wrong. Once we got this party started, then they come in. The progressives come in and want to bring in their DJ. Okay, the party's good and worked up. Now I'm bringing in, my DJ and my agenda. Yeah. The women's agenda, for example, black women, not white women, black women got the part, changed the way the world worked in 2018. But white women's agenda was pushed forward. Now, I'm going to tell you that abortion is very important to me. I understand, well, not me anymore, but I'm sure it's an important issue, but it's not on the front burner for black women. Equal pay is, right? Child care tax credit and equal pay and transportation and housing, affordable housing. That's our agenda. But it got pushed back because, women won this. No, it wasn't women. It was a subset of women, right? And our feminist agenda is different from the white female feminist agenda. And the racism within the feminist world is just unbelievable. So we have to acknowledge that there's racism on both ends of that prism. And what we have to do is stand in the gap and be our leaders of our own cause. And that's where Sarah and the young people are taking up their own causes. Native American communities like Black Lives Matter, yeah, but look what they're doing to us. They're coming in here, killing us with this COVID, and then going to run over the treaty on us. Look at what they're doing to us. And they took ownership of their agenda, and we're going to get a new name for that team in Washington that they've been trying to get for years, but it's when they took ownership and didn't let other people say, well, we'll get to that. Well, yes, that's important, but let's work on this first. When they took ownership, now they're getting the change. They took ownership, and now that pipeline is shut down. They took ownership, and now they own half the state of Oklahoma. If we have to drive our own agenda, and we have to recognize that our agenda is not the same as other people's agenda to the right or the left of us.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. And they almost shut down a whole rally because they almost stopped that rally at Mount Rushmore with some of their protests and everything. So they were coming real close to stopping that rally. Unfortunately, the rally went on, but they definitely had a group of folks who were definitely trying to stop it and letting folks know that that was not just Mount Rushmore, but it was also Lakota land, which had a whole different name that they have for it. So they were letting folks be aware of its history in terms of its native history. So that's very true that we do have to do that.
Where they came from. Now the joke I got in, Sarah, you got to catch me.
That was
good. Yeah, she's beating you down, Sarah. Fernando was saying that he was giving some ideas, and I've got another one I'm going to add to the ones he talked about. But he said Uplift Africa is a fund forming for investment around the diaspora. So apparently that's a fund that's dealing with diaspora funding. And he also said Menabytes is a good source for Middle Eastern development. So apparently that's a group that's doing a lot of stuff around Middle Eastern development. And I know that my friend Sri does a show similar to this, the COVID talks that he does daily, and then he reads the New York Times on every Sunday morning. But he had a young lady on that runs this thing called I Fund Women. And she actually comes out of the Google empire. I think Karen Khan is her name, but she does a program called I Fund Women. She made it very clear that she funds others than women as well, but the target market is women entrepreneurs. But I think there might be some others that get some money as well, and they definitely can get the education. I'm not sure they can get the money, but I know they can get the education of the male gender and everything. But it's called I Fund Women, and it's very much about funding women in the that are trying to start women-empowered businesses and women entrepreneurships. She also made it very clear that you had to be cautious about being an entrepreneur, as she put it, and it kind of comes back to you, Sarah. She said, don't quit your day job if you want to be an entrepreneur. In other words, she was urging you to definitely keep those other jobs until you got the entrepreneurship project going. After it's going and you knew it was your passion and you were able to go with it, then keep it going. But she made it very clear. Because, some folks think that they want to be an entrepreneur and they ready to quit their day job, stop working at McDonald's or stop working at IBM or wherever else they may be working at. But she made it very clear that make sure that you had a business plan for one thing, and definitely don't just quit your job until you had everything in place. Stella, you've done some business consulting. Would you give similar kind of advice for folks that are trying to start their businesses?
Absolutely, but also don't take no for an answer. If you're an entrepreneur, if that's entrepreneurial spirit means you can't just quit because it didn't go right the first time. Look for different avenues to get done what you need done, but understand the cost, right? What it costs to run a business, and plan that out for at least a year plus 3 months, okay? So if your business plan is around a restaurant, it's not enough that you got a good chicken recipe and you know how to cook. You got to know how much it costs to rent the freezers, how much is stock, how much supplies you need. Do you need supplies delivered weekly or daily? How big a crowd are you expecting? What is your capacity? Do you have the kinds of services that people are looking for? If you're Sarah and you're looking for your pilot program, right? So what kind of market are you looking at? And what's the production cost? And how many actors do you need? Do you have to pay scale? Will they take, what's the front end cost? What's the back end? Oh, you didn't think I knew your business. I know something. What's the front end cost? What's the back end cost? What's the distribution method? What's the distribution cost? Who gets the money? Okay, who's going to make the money at the end of the day when you get your 100 episodes in and you're up for syndication? What are the syndication rights? What percentage of that are the actors going to get? Are the writers going to get? You want all kind of credits. You want writer credits. You want producer credits, director credits, because you want that money. The credit means money. And so you want as much of that to stay internal as possible. Then you want to look at, okay, so you go to the main networks and they say no. What about looking at angel investors who might then fund the production of 10 episodes? And then all you're looking for is a distribution deal, right? Or you can do the pilot and then try to sell both the episodes and the distribution, which is harder, I think. Tyler Perry, when he went to the networks, he had 100 episodes. He got a deal for 100 episodes in the distribution up front. And that's why he's able to produce all those different shows. So you want to think about those mechanisms, but the main thing you want to do is you want to build in money for you to eat. Many people build in money to run the business, but then that pays the bills. But after they pay all the bills, there's no money to eat. There's no money to pay the rent. You factor that into the budget. How much do I need to subsist? Lights, water, food. Then you put all your production on top of that. So I just want people to think about it from a fundamental point of view. And then you have to be willing to work 22/7. I'll give you two hours, to breathe. But you got to be willing to work.
100%.
All the time. And nobody should work 24/7 because that's not good for it and it's not healthy. So 22/7, you're going to have to work if you're an entrepreneur.
So, Sarah, how much of that have you already done? How much of those have you got? How many pilots do you have? How much of that have you already put in place?
Was actually formative. I still, my first when I 2 years ago, still trying to, I've done pretty much what I could. I actually pitched it to Effie Brown last year, which was very cool. It was cool to get feedback on it. And I'm still a little trying to get that off the ground, but yes, finance actually in the process of kind of building out a production chart as well as to live in LA and to eat. And, that's very stressful. That definitely contributes to the anxiety, but it's worth it. And, even if Saffron and Rose didn't end up getting picked up by anything, to have all those Iranian Americans reach out to me personally and say, hey, I really needed this show growing up, and thank you so much for fighting for our representation. It was worth it. And so we're just going to try it again and see how it works. And thank you, Stella. Angel investors, I'm going to look more into that.
Yep. Sounds like a plan. You've already got your homework, which is going into the angel investors.
Yes.
Get ready to wrap up everything. I do want Stella and you, Sarah, to get an opportunity to give some words of encouragement to folks that have been listening, and also tell folks how they can reach out to you. And I'd like to start. I'll go Sarah first and then Stella. But Sarah, tell folks how they can reach you, and also this is an opportunity for folks to find out what kind of comedy is your kind of comedy, or what they can expect if they come to one of your comedy shows. If you want to tell a joke, since Stella's already beaten you a couple of times, and you can do that now too as well. But definitely tell folks how they can reach you. If you want to share one of your trade jokes or anything, that'll be cool as well.
I will say, do venture into dark humor, and I actually am a roast battle with Jeff Ross. So we get pretty crazy, but yeah, I just try to stick as authentically as I can to myself, my perspective as a Middle Eastern woman from Ohio who visited the Middle East, navigating life at 27. You can find me on, it's at Sarah Fatemi SarahFatemi. Same with YouTube channel, Twitter, and I have a lot of my sketches and stuff that I write, produce, and act in. And reach out to me, DM me. I will message back. And I always show dates on Instagram. So.
Okay, cool. Appreciate you. Stella, tell folks how they can reach you and some of the activism work that you might be currently working on. You touched on a lot of it, but anything that is a project that you're currently working on that you're really passionate about. And then for both of you, and I meant to have that Sarah do that as well, but we'll go to Stella now, and then I'll have both of you give any words of encouragement that you can give to folks in these hard times that we're in, where we're facing all kinds of crises, whether that's the economic crisis, the pandemic, the racial divide, or the various other divides that are going out there. But definitely, Stella, tell folks how they can get in touch with you and any things that you might be working on now in terms of activism projects, and then we'll go to the words of encouragement.
All right. Well, you can reach me at Twitter at FAIRHSGSTELLA. That's Fair Housing Stella at Twitter. You can reach me through my website for my business, which is www.sjadamsconsulting.net. And you can find me on Facebook, Stella Adams 1, I think, on Facebook. I just want to encourage people to be yourself and enjoy life, and take advantage of this opportunity. This is an opportunity. You know, you can turn threats into opportunity, but this is an opportunity. You've got your home, you got your computer, learn something. Do something that you never had time to do before. And in the words of one of my really good friends, Jeffrey May, and this is for you, Sarah, coins add up in large amounts. So you don't have to invest $1 million. If you can invest $10 in a cause or a purpose, that can make a real difference in a person's life. I always remind people that I freed 4 slaves in Africa and the Northern Sudan with $400. That's what a life was worth there. And we have to remember that around the world, we're blessed here in America, but we have to fight. We have to win here so we can win everywhere. And just God bless you all. And that's my words of encouragement.
I appreciate that. And just to let you know, you're right. You have to sometimes just do a project. And sometimes that project might beat you down, but you still have to finish it. I had actually just ordered from Amazon a drawer, like a clothes drawer, and it was one of those assembly things. I am not the best assembly person in the world, but I managed to read those instructions. The drawer is complete and finished. It was about to kick my backside, but I did have somebody that gave me some encouragement and gave me some words of encouragement on a similar show like this. Is a buddy of mine's streaming show. So the young lady gave me, who's a coach, and she's actually from India, but she's a coach and gives people mentor, like the spiritual coaches and stuff like that. So she gave me some encouragement, and I went ahead and knocked that cabinet out. So it's now done and it's complete. And now I got to tackle this other one that's behind me, which is a bookshelf. So, I'm thinking that you can order these things, and after you order them, they come self-assembled. Doesn't work that way. You actually give you the supplies, and you got to fix it. So I agree with that. And just in full confidence, and Stella will correct me if I'm wrong, she does have some background, Sarah, in the world of television and stuff like that nature, because like she said, she's been involved in fair housing. So I believe, if I remember correctly, she was involved with a good friend of mine's telenovela, and that dealt with fair housing as well. So she knows from experience, because she was one of the creators of a telenovela that was done. When was that, about 10 years ago, Stella, or maybe a little bit longer?
About 10 years ago, we did Nuestro Barrio. It was a great telenovela. And we also did a movie called The Other Side. So I got a little something on that production side. Send me an email.
Wonderful. I will add you on Facebook. Absolutely. Thank you, Stella. Thank you. For my words, especially to my people of color in the entertainment industry, create your own projects. Don't wait for the movement towards. Create your own projects, market it, create your own path. It's all in your.
I appreciate that, and that's a very powerful message. Definitely appreciate that. I think that y'all will be great connectors in terms of connecting each other.
Glad
that both of y'all are on the show. Like I said, Stella has definitely done some work in a lot of industries, everything from the regular housing work that most people expect, which is going knocking on the doors and helping people with their housing, or the telenovela, but she's definitely been involved with a number of things. You'll have to see about getting with her and Jilcy, our mutual friend that did that project, about seeing if we can't get it and maybe even airing it here on the IBM TV platform, since I know that they are showing movies and things of that nature. So we might have to bring it out of the dust balls and see if we can't re-air it.
That would be really helpful because it was around this crisis. So that's a good idea. Call Jilcy.
I will definitely call her and reach out to her and see if we can do that and make that happen. So I appreciate both of y'all being on. Y'all were amazing guests. Definitely enjoyed having you both on. Hope to have you both on at another time. Hopefully you will come back on in the not too distant future and share some of your other stories. But I definitely enjoyed the conversation, and I think folks definitely learned a lot. I saw some different eyes that were popping in from around the country. Like I said, Fernando was listening over there from LA, but I saw some other eyes that were watching as well. I think I saw some folks from India and other parts of the world. So definitely tell your friends about it as well, because they can definitely go back and re-listen to the Facebook Live, as well as it's going to be on our YouTube site. I believe it might be on Twitter and LinkedIn. So definitely go back and check the various platforms and hear the interview again and things of that nature. So I appreciate both of you being on. And of course, here on the platform, we have some other great shows. So I know that on Thursday, they have Podcasters Thursdays, where they invite various podcasters on. And one of the podcasters comes all the way from Jamaica. Another one, I think, comes from Europe, maybe from England or something like that. And then I know that they have the folks from South Africa. One of the South African ladies, who's actually, I think, around your age, Sarah, but she has her own music program that she does. And she spends her time between South Africa and Nashville. Of course, now she's all at home in South Africa because she's managed by, I believe, both her mom and her dad. But she's, with COVID, she's not traveling the world, unfortunately. So she's in South Africa, but definitely looking forward to getting back to the Nashville area. But she's still doing her show, Alexandria May, and that airs on Sundays, if I remember correctly. And then my friend Zach does a funk show on this platform that airs on, actually does two, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. So we have a great amount of great shows. We've also got some folks that are working on some shows revolving around cricket. We've got a couple of shows revolving around chess and things of that nature, because part of their mission is to definitely have folks that are not always heard be heard. So that's part of their platform. So that is definitely something that they do on a regular basis. And so hopefully folks will go back and look at the IBM TV YouTube website and see some of these great shows that are on a regular basis. And like I say, I know they're always looking forward to having other folks on the platform as well. As a matter of fact, I even have to get both of you, Sarah and Stella, on a platform of your own, because I know that they've talked about having other folks have their own shows as well. So definitely after the pilot is done, maybe we'll get the pilot on this platform as well. So I have to talk to Kim Calhoun and some of the other world producers around, because some of the folks that are prying this are from throughout. Two of our folks are right here in the Raleigh-Durham area, that being Kim Calhoun and Nick, trying to remember his last name. I know it begins with a P, and I think it's a Greek name. But then there's Ankit, who's over there in India, and some of the other producers are around the world. So definitely, I know that they're always adding new shows. They just added a spiritual show that is based on a yoga person here in this area, and they just added that not too long ago, and they're working on some other new shows. So definitely might have to have Stella give some activism advice, and have Sarah do a show on here as well. So we'll talk to my bosses and see what they've got to say, but I'm sure that they will definitely be interested in that concept. So want to thank both of you once again for being guests. I think folks learned a whole lot, and I look forward to having you back on in the very near future.
Thank you. We appreciate having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
day.
No problem.
Bye, Sarah.
You.
Call me. Call me.
For sure, 100%.